Let's talk to Rupert Lowe, Reform MP, of course, from Great Yarmouth. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm very well. It doesn't seem like 5 years ago, really. I was at a party. I didn't make it to the Parliament Square party because I couldn't get there, basically. I couldn't get near enough to it because I left the pub that I was in quite late. But I did make it to a party with Nigel Farage and several other people. You may have been there as well, somewhere in Piccadilly. And I was just saying earlier to another guest that it was a great moment. It felt as though something had changed in Britain, something had really, there was a new beginning, it was a watershed moment, all of those, phrases. And I was really feeling quite optimistic when I walked out of there, got in a cab and went home. And then suddenly it all kind of disappeared in the morass of COVID.
Well, I think the most significant date, Mike, was June 2016, when the Democratic majority of 17.4 million people voted to leave the EU, despite being recommended by our great establishment to remain. And the problem we had is it then took, as you know, 4 years before we actually finally left. So I celebrated twice, really. Once when we thought we'd left, and then once when we actually did leave in 2020. I'm a great believer in cooperating nation states. I think that's what's made Europe great. And the post-war plan to create a sort of socialist Europe bound together largely to stop Germany declaring war on France and France declaring war on Germany didn't suit the British. As you know, we were always being outvoted by this qualified majority voting, which was a large part of the EU's constitution. And to get out of that, it's given us control of our own borders, it's given us potentially control of our own trade. And actually, you know what, Mike, although we don't get the truth, we should have done so much better if we'd had a government that actually wanted Brexit. We could be by now booming, and we could be way ahead of Donald Trump and what's happening in the US. But the truth is that our establishment, the Uni Party, as I call them, is responsible for holding us back. But despite that, our trade with the world has grown, with countries like Kazakhstan, for instance. Nobody talks about it, but quietly, Britain's doing very well. The problem we've now got is we have a Labour government that wants to centrally plan everything. So rather than allowing the individual companies and entrepreneurs to decide where we take the economy, Rachel Reeves wants to try what the communists tried, to centrally plan everything. And she will cause us a big problem. But at least we have control of our own country, our own borders, our own trade. We can make the decisions, and once Reform wins the election, we can hopefully watch with admiration what's been happening in America and to a large extent replicate it and cut free the potential of this fantastic country.
True enough. I mean, the funny thing is, despite the fact that our own economy isn't doing brilliantly, it's still doing better than Germany's, it's still doing better than France, it's still doing better than the bulk of Europe, and has been doing so for quite some time, certainly since we left the European Union. But I mean, Nigel Farage...
Well, Mike, that's an incredibly important point. I mean, Germany, her economy is really struggling. Politically, she's obviously now moving radically to the right. I think France is bust, and ultimately, she leveraged off Germany. That's why she insisted that Germany join the euro at the time. Germany actually wanted to maintain the Deutschmark. And actually Germany then got the benefit of a weak Deutschmark because she was part of this what I call homunculus-like Europe. So I think now Germany's economy is struggling, and if you look at what Donald Trump's going to do, he's very fixated on two things: trade, and Germany, France and Europe have a huge trade surplus with America, largely because they have a protectionist approach to life. So Donald Trump doesn't like that, and I think he's going to exact a lot of revenge on those people who don't have fair trade practices with the US. And obviously the second thing he's going to be quite focused on, I think, is how much people spend to ensure global peace, which, as we know, America has paid probably more than anybody for that. Germany and France have probably not paid enough. So I think Europe's not only lost our contribution to the EU, which is rapidly diminishing, it's virtually gone. There's a few trail payments to pay. I personally wouldn't have paid them, but that's what was agreed. And you know, she's basically got all the forces against her, which helped her. So, as in Star Wars terms, the Force is not with her.
No, no, indeed. And in fact, I mean, as I say, what I was about to say was that Nigel Farage has said in a couple of the pieces he's written today in the papers that he's starting to think now that Boris Johnson's heart was never really in leaving the European Union, because he sort of did it as a halfway house job. Northern Ireland got left out of it. You and I have spoken about that many times. And it was kind of left to its own devices to some extent. And Northern Ireland sort of still isn't really sorted out. And we know Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves want to go back to having closer ties with the EU.
Yeah, just at the time when we should be aligning ourselves with the Anglo-Saxon world, which is going to be having a much freer trade and much more entrepreneurial structure. I mean, talking about Boris upsets me, Mike. I mean, he was an abject failure. I think the guy is fundamentally a journalist. I think his attention span can't cope with a week or more than a week. And if you look at what he presided over, he said he cut immigration. He presided over the huge growth of this,
it went up
both
massively
legal and illegal migration. And then he allowed his wife free rein on the green issues, which again he'd come out against in the past. So read his articles from the past; they're quite sound. But watch what he did when he was in power with an 80-seat majority. And as I say to most Tories who remarkably are still on some occasions loyal to the Tory party, I asked them what did Boris Johnson do with an 80-seat majority, and the answer, Mike, is diddly squat. Or absolute diddly
And that's
squat,
the problem. I mean, there are
it.
still plenty of Conservative voters who think he did a brilliant job. And there were some things that he was very good at, but I think his legacy will be that, you know, he got Brexit done, but not quite.
But he didn't, because as you quite rightly say, we had the Northern Ireland Protocol, which we hated, which morphed into the Windsor Agreement, which again, Rishi sort of heralded, but actually worse than the Northern Ireland Protocol. And what we did, we allowed the border to be put down the Irish Sea, and we allowed the Act of Union to be undermined. So I don't think we did Brexit well. But even so, we still now control our own borders. You know, we were able, even though I disagreed with this wretched rollout of the untested COVID jab, as you know, and we had a debate in Parliament about that the other day, about the MHRA. We still had the power to make decisions for ourselves, and we still have that power now. You don't have that power if you're part of this, you know, huge amalgam of paralysis, which is controlled by the European Commission, which is an unelected body.
Yeah, indeed, as is the ECHR, which is the other problem.
ECHR, HRA, Equalities Act, you name it, Mike. When we win the election, we have to have the Great Repeal Act followed by national restoration. That's what we need.
Right. Well, I look forward to that day coming, Rupert. Thank you very much indeed. Rupert Lowe, Reform MP for Great Yarmouth there, talking about the Brexit referendum. And